Are ICE officers becoming more violent? This is Media Lit. I'm Kieran Outshorn, and reporting shows that the encounters that ICE officers are having with people out in the world in the United States while they're trying to do their immigration enforcement actions, which is a very sanitized way of saying it, but that those interactions are becoming more violent. And that fits with what we're seeing with our eyes. But the reporting is backing this up as well. And the reasons for that are several fold. First, their training has been reduced. And this is something that the Trump administration has laid out. They used to be trained for a longer period of time, but that's been shortened because they are trying to get more officers out into the streets and into active duty. And that has a challenge because these are people who haven't potentially worked in law enforcement before and don't know the best way to approach these rules. Another reason that these encounters have become more violent and more chaotic is that the Trump administration and both Trump at the top, but also his lieutenants, are giving tacit approval, saying that even the use of fatal, lethal force is reasonable in their opinion, and that is helping motivate some of these ICE officers to continue what they're doing, and is leading to a more aggressive approach while they're out there in the field. And the last thing that is particularly interesting in what's happening here is that these new tactics, which are leading to more violence and more disruption in communities, are in opposition to ICE's own documents on how to approach situations, which emphasize de-escalation and trying to find peaceful outcomes in all but the most extreme cases. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing what was a law enforcement agency that is now being used and goaded and encouraged to act in more violent ways against a segment of the population which is targetable through some broad terms. And one example of this is that the Supreme Court recently said that it is reasonable for ICE officers in the United States to stop and search people based off of the color of their skin and the fact that they speak Spanish. Now, if you are curious about anything I just said, is it true what I just said? Is it not true? How did I know those details? Well, I want you to stick with me because we're going to roll back time on this video all the way to the start, and I'm going to walk through step by step the stories that I read, the things that I checked on to fact check and bring those details out. So stick with me and we'll get into it. Okay, so we're going to get started here today. I'm going to jump in and take a look at my Google Doc at what our focus statement is. Coming over here to the Google Doc, focus statement is federal immigration enforcement in the United States is becoming more violent and volatile because the Trump administration is signaling tacit approval for lethal force and aggressive tactics, even when internal immigration customs enforcement guidelines emphasize de-escalation as the last line of defense. Okay, interesting focus statement. The part that's jumping out to me is immigration enforcement becoming more violent. So let's start there. Is that something that is true? So let's Google it. Right off the bat, so this is just the regular news feed. We have a Reuters story. This is Trump's showy immigration enforcement leads to violent, I don't know, but it goes on. That's from 6 days ago. We're going to open that and check it out. Now we're going to click on the news feed just to pick up from there specifically. We have a New York Times FBI inquiry into ICE shooting is examining victim possible ties to activist groups. That is an interesting element and development of this story, but not necessarily within the scope of our focus statement. We have Trump showing immigration enforcement leads to violent confrontations. Okay, that's from 5 days ago. That's the one we've clicked on. We're going to go check that out in a second. Live updates. Minneapolis ICE shooting tensions after man is shot in leg after allegedly assaulting officer. That was updated 58 minutes ago. That's a live feed. And we've talked about this before, but the live feeds are something that a lot of these big news organizations will do when there's something breaking minute by minute. They'll create a feed where you can kind of read and follow what's going on. And a lot of times those feeds will stick around even after the live feed closes, so you can access it and read later. Former ICE members say recent violence is by design. That's by Mother Jones. We'll take a look at that. That's 1 day ago. You can see right there. Wired. What to do if ICE invades your neighborhood? Not exactly what we're looking for. Federal officer shoots man. DHS says fleeing a traffic stop. I mean, that is sort of more about the more recent, just immediate news. Nationwide anti-ICE protests call for accountability after Renee Good's death. Just in case you have been living under a rock, this story is coming in response to a ramp up of what they're calling immigration enforcement in the United States by ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And they were in Minnesota last week, and in a situation that I haven't actually read anything that's explained exactly what was going on. But there was a woman who was in a vehicle that was stopped in the road, blocking traffic, and ended up in an altercation with ICE officers. Looked like she was trying to flee. The ICE officers ended up pulling his gun and shooting her, claiming that she was trying to ram him, although, to be fair, he was the one who stepped in front of her vehicle. And actually, I think that's sort of in line with probably what we're going to be looking at today. So why is ICE so aggressive now? Former ICE chief explains. This is Politico from October 14th, 2025. That's a little bit old. I'm not sure that's going to give us what we're looking for. Everything we're looking at here now, September, 1 month ago, October, 3 weeks ago, 1 week ago, 4 weeks ago. Some of these are starting to get a little bit old. Why don't we start off with the first story we got here? It says, Trump's showy immigration enforcement leads to violent confrontation. I'm going to take a look at this story and read it. Who's this written by? So, this is written by Ted Hessen and Christina Cook, immigration reporter and an investigative reporter. Okay, so let me pull over and get into reading this. Okay, so I have finished reading through this story, and I have highlighted a number of sections officials have come to. So let me walk through some of the elements. So here, this top bit, the U.S. President Donald Trump sweeping immigration crackdown, increasingly sparking violent confrontations with both migrants and U.S. citizens, a development grimly underscored by the ICE fatal shooting of a Minneapolis woman this week. Okay, so this is the start of the article. This is the main thesis that they're laying out, and they're going to try to then make this case. Here they say this: the contentious encounters have come amid a push to quickly recruit and train thousands of new officers, and have stemmed from a dramatic shift in approach to the immigration enforcement, according to current and former immigration officials. So what's interesting here, so first off, they link to another story or another element here. Okay, so another Reuters story. Inside ICE, Trump's migrant crackdown is taking a toll on its officers. So I think this will probably give us a little bit of detail, because what I was going to say is that this is according to current and former immigration officials, but they don't go into any further detail about who are these current and former immigration officials. Basically, this paragraph is laying out the thesis of this article and arguing this is what is happening there, and they provide this link for you to be able to follow if you want to find out who these immigration officials are. So we're gonna do that in a minute. But this right here, they're saying basically, why are people becoming more violent? Well, it's these contentious encounters are coming, one, because they're trying to train people super quickly, and two, because there's been a big shift in the approach that they're taking. Scrolling down. Okay, so this high visibility, high footprint, high contact form of operation that invites danger, said a former ICE official, Scott Schuart, who served in the Biden administration. I imagine he's probably going to be quoted more in this other story, but that's one person who has put his name to this, who's saying, hey, look, the way they're doing things is different than how we were doing things, and that's part of why this has become a bigger issue. Okay, within hours of the incident, so this is after the woman, Renee Good, was killed, 37-year-old mother of three, was killed. Within hours of the incident, Naomi alleged that Good tried to ram the officer with the vehicle. So, this is Noam. So we have Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. They've all defended the ICE officer. Now we have this linked again that we can go to. J.D. Vance takes lead in defending Minnesota ICE. Oops. So J.D. Vance takes lead in defending Minnesota ICE shooting, dares Democrats to engage. Basically, if you missed all this, the vice president came out swinging. Trump has come out with a lot of comments as well, saying that this woman, this 37-year-old, that she was a terrorist and that the officer was totally justified in his actions. Of course, they hadn't performed any kind of investigation yet. They were just sort of jumping to these conclusions. This article, I imagine, will go through that in quite a lot of detail. Back to the article that we were on. So basically, we have all these officials who are immediately backing up the ICE agent. That's linked in a story. Within hours, Noam is alleging that she tried to ram this woman who was killed, tried to ram her vehicle as an act of domestic terrorism. And why this is interesting is that the actions of the ICE officers, including taking lethal action and killing a civilian, they aren't going to be chastened. They're not going to feel like their actions are maybe were a step too far when the immediate response by the officials are to back them up and support them. And there might be people who will argue that the officer made the right choice. That's not really what we're getting into here. What we're talking about is that the normal procedure of presenting a investigation or moving to an investigation to get all the facts was not followed by these Trump officials, and therefore that is emboldening to the ICE officers in the streets, which may be another contributing factor to that thesis in our focus statement, which is that federal immigration in the United States is becoming more violent and volatile because the Trump administration is signaling tacit approval. There you go. There's that tacit approval for lethal force and aggressive tactics. So this story is definitely showing us some of that. Here's this Homeland spokesperson, Teresa McLaughlin. We actually did a short about her initial tweets that came out right away. She was lying in those initial tweets. She made false statements continuously or like consistently throughout it. But she's one of the voices that's in this story, and I think she'll come up a little bit later. Okay, so moving on. ICE posed to ramp up in 2026. Several of the current and former ICE officers speaking on the condition of anonymity. Again, this is the story that we haven't gotten to yet. We've heard from one former ICE officer who did put his name on the record. Obviously, when people are willing to put their names on the record, actually put out there that they are saying something, that makes something much more credible. It's not that anonymous sources, and these sources aren't anonymous, but they have confidentiality. Often the person who is making writing the story, they'll know who the people are, but they won't put the name out there, and it's because they're expecting there's some sort of like pushback for them. Now, like I'm saying, it's always a lot more credibility when people are actually willing to put their names to it, because the whole point of journalism and the idea is that we're trying to have a conversation in the public square, and people who have opinions and takes and responses and knowledge are trying to share what they have to say, and so we want to be able to put names to them. Okay, so scrolling down just a little bit more. The training for the new ICE officers had previously been 5 months, but the Trump administration reduced it to 2 months as part of its efforts to speed up hires, McLaughlin said. So this is why it's important that we identified who McLaughlin was earlier. So basically, the fact that their training periods are getting much shorter, that's a fact. That's something that the Trump administration has said, so we can rely on that as well. Federal immigration officers have shot 16 people since the Trump intensified its crackdown in June, according to the Trace, a nonprofit news outlet that tracks gun violence. So I'm assuming this will probably link us to the Trace. Here we go. Here's the Trace. How many people have been shot in ICE raids? And so these guys are doing that journalistic work here by Jennifer Macia. They're doing that work to try to identify and find out who's being shot, where, and how. And so we can read through this later if we wanted to get the details on all 16 of those. All right, so the incidents include the fatal shooting of in Chicago of a Mexican father who, after he was dropping off his kids, and the shooting of a TikTok streamer in Los Angeles and a U.S. citizen in Chicago. So those are all just some people. Those are some examples of the 16 people who have been shot. Okay, going down here, this last little bit I think is pretty interesting. The Supreme Court in September said the Trump administration could stop people in the U.S. citing for reasonable suspicion of violating immigration laws because of factors such as having brown skin or speaking Spanish. So basically, they're saying that probable cause that you could be breaking the law is just who you are. And that is, gotta do this again. Basically, this is saying that, it's reasonable to stop people because of who they are. And I think that's a very interesting development in the legal system in the United States. Okay, so we've gone through the story, and what have we found out? Basically, we've seen that, yes, it is definitely true that the training period for these officers has been shortened. Yes, we've also seen evidence that the Trump administration has been signaling tacit approval of some of the violent and aggressive tactics that ICE agents have been using. We've also seen some reporting, although we're going to dive into this a little bit more, about how the current and former ICE officials are saying that the way in which they are going about their immigration enforcement actions has changed since the past. That this has gone through a change. I mean, like, we could have seen that with our own two eyes, but hey, here's the reporting that's definitely showing that it's happening. Okay, so let me just double check here. I'm going to look at inside the ICE's Trump crackdown, taking its toll on officers. This was written in August, so it's a little bit older. And I'm just going to read this really quickly because this is written by Ted Hesson, who is that same reporter who wrote that last article. And I'm just going to read through this because I think it's worth just following up on so that I have a good sense of what these ICE officers are saying. I think that's going to be useful to read. I'm going to just run through really quickly some of the key elements. So the sources that they had for the story are 2 current and 9 former ICE officials spoke to Reuters. Most of them spoke on the request of most of the current and former ICE officials requested anonymity due to concerns of retaliation against themselves and their former colleagues. Who else did they talk to? They also interviewed Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, for this article. And they also spoke to Carrie Doyle, a former legal advisor at ICE. So, a pretty well-sourced piece. Lots of folks. In their story, they talk about that all the people they interviewed backed immigration enforcement in principle, but criticized Trump's administration's push for high daily quotas that led to detentions of thousands of individuals with no criminal records, as well as long-time green card holders, others with legal visas, and even some U.S. citizens. So basically, these are folks who, broadly speaking, are pro immigration enforcement. Obviously, they worked within that department, and feel like things have gone sideways over time. So I feel like this gives us a nice picture and understanding that sort of like informs this first story that we read when they're talking about, according to current and former officials, the dramatic shift in the approach to immigration enforcement is something that is laid out in that previous story as well. So this is another really important part of reading stories, is a lot of times, especially when a reporter is on the same beat, they're building on their reporting over time. So, this reporter who wrote this, Ted Hesson, he's able to provide more context and detail because he's been reporting over time. But as a reader, sometimes you need to walk back in time and kind of take a look at where that story is coming from. You need to sort of follow up and see some of those details just so that you can feel confident in sort of how they're using some of the reporting they've done in the past as shorthand in the reporting that they're doing now. Okay, so I know we keep on going back and forth to our focus statement, and this story is a thorny one, so I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm kind of nailing it. So looking at this focus statement again, federal immigration enforcement in the United States is becoming more violent and more volatile. I think that the details that we've seen on that front are both true. Actually, there were some details in this most recent story that we were just looking at, the one from August, that showed the month over month. Yeah, this is the number of arrests that have been happening from February 2025 through to July. So it's a line going straight up. And so that definitely validates that the enforcement is at least becoming more volatile. It's definitely more active. And as we've been reading in these firsthand reports, and also what we're seeing coming out of Minneapolis, it is more violent. Now, why is that happening? Well, our focus statement says, well, this is happening because the Trump administration is signaling tacit approval for lethal force and aggressive tactics. Okay, so have we seen that in the reporting? I would say yes. I think that we clearly see the Trump administration, from J.D. Vance to what's her name, Noem, to Trump himself, giving tacit approval and agreeing that that what ICE is doing is correct, that their approach to how they are enforcing these things and moving forward. Kristi Noem, God, I always forget her name. Kristi Noem. So that their approach that they're taking is within sort of the confines that the Trump administration is happy with, and that includes the lethal force. I think they've been actually really explicit about that, the tactics. Even when internal immigration customs enforcement guidelines emphasize de-escalation. Okay, so this is a part of the story that we don't have yet. Internal immigration custom enforcement guidelines. So I don't know who was reporting on that. Let's actually just open a new window. We are going to just search for this. Guideline documents. Let's look at news. So we have internal immigration and custom enforcement guidelines. Here we have a New York Times article from 88 hours ago that says, under Trump, a shift towards absolute immunity for ICE. So we're going to take a look at this article and see what it has to say. Perhaps it's going to flesh out that last bit of this focus statement for us. Okay, so here we are with the New York Times. We are going to read this story as well and see what it has to say. Okay, well, this article was very illuminating. It gave us a lot of details to get into. So first off, instructions to immigration and custom enforcement agencies explain in clear terms how to defuse dangerous encounters, use minimal force when trying to remove people from cars, issue commands in professional and firm and courteous voices. A lot of that is in quotations. Here's another quotation. First step in arresting an occupant of a vehicle is not to reach in to grab them unless the specific circumstances require that action. Reads an internal ICE document provided legal guidance for the use of force during vehicle stops. It was reviewed by the New York Times along with other training material. So basically, that's what the story is all about. They looked at some documents that they got from ICE and ICE's own internal documents. Their own training documents tell them to do almost exactly the opposite of what we are seeing them do, specifically in Minneapolis right now, but in many other places. Now, this article also touches on a number of other key elements. The response of Mr. Trump and his top lieutenants in the killing has also underscored how they have embraced what is supposed to be the last resort under the written standards, the use of lethal force. Rather than encourage agents to de-escalate combustible encounters, as the agency guidelines emphasize, Mr. Trump and his lieutenants have provided tacit approval for more aggressive tactics. So that is right in line with our focus statement. Here we have it, and we've seen, like in the reporting that we saw in Reuters, as well as this will also go on to show more examples of how Trump and his lieutenants have been saying that this is okay, that the agents should continue doing what they're doing. J.D. Vance, for example, said that guy's protected by absolute immunity. Then Stephen Miller, who is a White House deputy chief, I don't know if you've seen him before, but he's in a lot of these stories. He said, quote, to his officers, you have immunity to perform your duties, and no one, no city official, no state official, no illegal alien, no leftist agitator or domestic insurrectionist can prevent you from fulfilling your legal obligations and duties. He said that in a social media post, which apparently we can see here, so we're going to click on it here.
To all ICE officers, you have federal immunity in the conduct of your duties. And anybody who lays a hand on you or tries to stop you or tries to obstruct you is committing a felony. You have immunity to perform your duties, and no one, no city official, no state official, no illegal alien, no leftist agitator or domestic insurrectionist can prevent you from fulfilling your legal obligations and duties.
Yeah, so that is 100% what he said, like verbatim. Let me just get back to our article. Here we go. So Stephen Miller. So both J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller very clear in saying that giving tacit approval for the actions that the ICE officers are taking. Abigail Jackson, a White House spokesperson with ICE, said that they were using appropriate tactics. So here's another Trump lieutenant saying that how they're approaching these stops, the level of force that they're using is totally reasonable. She says the entire Trump administration stands behind our heroic ICE officers who are conducting themselves in the utmost professionalism and integrity, making American communities safer. What do we have down here? Scott Short, a senior ICE official in the Biden administration, said that the message from Trump administration officials to agents is to disregard their years or decades of training and to disregard what lawyers have told them. I think why this is particularly interesting is because we have another name here. And in that previous Reuters story, we had a number of anonymous officials. And I think that it's always more important and strong when you have specific names. Here we go back to the Times-reviewed Homeland Security documents that included training materials, use of force guidelines, prepared by ICE lawyers, and firearms policies. The training materials are from 2025, while the guidelines for use of force were published in 2023 and remain current. So that's just them explaining the documents that they had access to and that they saw. When feasible, this is them quoting from the document, authorized officers must employ tactics to de-escalate by use of communication or other tactics during an encounter to stabilize, slow, or reduce the intensity and potentially violent situation, one document states. The documents also described a use of force continuum that officers may follow. So that's a pretty detailed bit. There's a couple more things I had highlighted here. ICE officers are generally advised not to stand in front. Oh yeah, so this part. ICE officers are generally advised not to stand in front or behind stopped vehicles to avoid being run over, according to 3 former senior agency officials. So here they have anonymous people again, but basically they're saying, look, the tactics that this officer used, specifically in the Renee Good case, where he was standing both behind and then in front of the vehicle, were not standard policy, not what he should have been doing there. Okay, so let's go back. Here we go. Internal immigration and custom enforcement guidelines emphasize de-escalation as the last line of defense. So there you go. I think that the reporting that exists out there pretty strongly supports this focus statement and lays it out. And I think that we've read enough that we can probably do a summary here. So I'm going to try to do it. Are ICE officers becoming more violent?